HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Transpacific Experiment, How China and California Collaborate and Compete for Our Future, by Matt Sheehan, read by P.J. Ochlan. 塞翁失马，焉知非福? The old frontiersman lost his horse. How to know it's not a blessing. Chinese proverb. Introduction. Welcome to the Transpacific Experiment. Nestled against the western shores of the San Francisco Bay, Angel Island is both a monument to the past and a window into the future of the world's two most powerful countries. On the northeast corner of the island lies the Immigration Station, a relic of the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. That act of Congress was the capstone to the first era of major face-to-face engagement between Chinese and American people. California was the stage on which these two groups made their first introductions and impressions. They didn't exactly hit it off. After the discovery of gold in 1849, tens of thousands of Chinese men made landfall in San Francisco, a city they called Gold Mountain. Fleeing famine at home and dreaming of rivers running with precious metals, these men left their villages in southern China and clambered onto wooden ships that would carry them across the Pacific. In California, they dug for nuggets, cooked for cash, and earned a reputation as cheap but extremely valuable laborers. When Leland Stanford and his fellow robber barons set out to build the western segment of the Transcontinental Railroad, they enlisted Chinese workers for the most crucial and the most dangerous tasks. But these men entered an America rife with economic anxiety and racial resentment. To Irish laborers in San Francisco, men like my great-great-grandfather, these Chinese arrivals were seen as a threat to their jobs and an affront to their identity. Newspapers and dime novels spread fears of a yellow peril descending on American shores. Demagogues thrived, blaming the new Chinese arrivals when banking crises dragged down the American economy. Thugs carried out lynchings at Chinese labor camps, and California's own governor demanded that Congress check this tide of Asiatic immigration. Those clamoring for a law excluding Chinese laborers sparred with men like Wang Qinfu, a naturalized American citizen who became one of the most outspoken defenders of Chinese rights. As residents of the United States, we claim a common manhood with all other nationalities, Wang wrote in 1893, and believe we should have that manhood recognized according to the principles of common humanity and American freedom. But those principled appeals largely fell on deaf ears among white immigrants resentful of the new competition. My own great-great-grandfather arrived in San Francisco in the 1870s, working at the Pacific Rolling Mill and living in a tough part of town known as Irish Hill. Our family doesn't have any record of him participating in anti-Chinese activity, but he certainly fit the demographic profile. A working-class Irish Catholic immigrant laborer scratching to carve out his space in a new city and country. His son and my great-grandfather, Tommy Sheehan, was born in San Francisco in 1879, 3 years before the Chinese Exclusion Act became law. Orphaned at a young age, Tommy grew up in St. Vincent's Home for Boys and went on to become a San Francisco longshoreman and union organizer. In that role, he befriended Peter C. York, a priest and vocal advocate for Irish laborers. Tommy used to drive York around the city on weekends, smoking cigarettes and talking shop. In our family, York is remembered as a righteous defender of the working man, but he did not extend that empathy to Chinese laborers. Keynoting the 1901 California Chinese Exclusion Convention, York railed against Chinese people who remained in the country during the exclusion era. We are face-to-face with an immigration which is emphatically not Christian, York told the crowd. Their thoughts are not our thoughts. Their blood is not our blood. Their outlook is not our outlook. 4 years after that speech, construction began on the Angel Island Immigration Station, where thousands of Chinese people looking to make a home in California would be held. One of the few exceptions in the Chinese Exclusion Act allowed for children and spouses of Chinese people in America to follow their relatives over. The immigration station hosted interrogations designed to separate out true blood relatives from paper sons, people who would claim a false familial relation in order to enter the country. Immigration officials would have new arrivals draw their family trees and maps of their home villages. Virtually all Chinese laborers in the U.S. were recruited from just a handful of counties in the south of China near Hong Kong, allowing immigration officials to cross-reference these diagrams with those drawn by earlier immigrants, attempting to weed out the paper sons in the process. Detentions could go on for weeks or even months. Some were finally granted entry to the country, others were sent back across the Pacific. Thousands of miles from home, but barred from San Francisco's shores, the Chinese prisoners carved poems into the wooden walls of the immigration station, engravings that you can still see there today. America has power, but not justice. In prison, we were victimized as if we were guilty. Given no opportunity to explain, it was really brutal. I bow my head in reflection, but there is nothing I can do. The Transpacific Panorama. Today, Angel Island offers a panoramic view of a new Transpacific reality, one being forged by the new era of large-scale face-to-face engagement between Chinese and American people. The surrounding landscape is where the world's two superpowers are getting reacquainted with one another at ground level in the 21st century. For a window into that process at work, we just need to take a short walk south from the immigration station. Exiting through the front door of the building, hang a right and head south along the island's paths for about a mile. Reaching the shore, scramble out to Point Blunt at the southeast corner of the island. These boulders offer up a sweeping view of the Bay Area. Berkeley and Ochlan to the east, Treasure Island in the middle of the bay, and San Francisco to the west. If the fog hasn't rolled in, you can just barely catch glimpses of Silicon Valley in the distance to the south. Starting in the east, you can see the Campanile, a Gothic clock tower at the center of University of California, Berkeley. Over the last decade, the number of Chinese undergrads at UC Berkeley has multiplied by a factor of 10, a microcosm of a nationwide boom in Chinese enrollment on U.S. campuses. In the aftermath of the financial crisis, public universities that saw their funding slashed at home turned to China, hoping that an influx of international undergrads paying higher tuition could fill the gaping holes in university budgets. Many Americans saw an additional benefit to the new arrivals: a chance to show the light to China's next generation, exposing them to free speech and planting the seeds of China's own democratic reforms. But things haven't exactly gone as planned. When confronted by the political evangelism of their American peers, many Chinese students feel increasingly confident in, or defensive about, their home country. It's a group that isn't necessarily buying into American political values. And the sheer number of new arrivals has stirred anxiety among some California students and parents, who fear that admission to America's top public universities is being auctioned to the highest bidder. That backlash is now going national, with members of the Trump administration accusing these undergrads of spying for their home country and proposing a total ban on Chinese students. Panning east to west across the Bay Bridge, you catch sight of the two largest housing developments in the region, both of which needed funding from Chinese investors to get off the ground. Past the cranes of the Ochlan shipyards lies Brooklyn Basin, a 2,300-unit development going up just past Jack London Square. And across the water in San Francisco's Bayview Hunters Point neighborhood, Chinese immigrant investors have poured hundreds of millions of dollars into the San Francisco shipyard, the city's largest housing and retail development in decades. That development rubs up against San Francisco's only remaining predominantly black neighborhood, the last island of affordability in a city that has seen a massive exodus of African Americans amid tech-fueled gentrification. As Chinese money comes in and the buildings go up, longtime residents look on with hope for new jobs and fear of displacement. Gazing south towards Silicon Valley, you can see the home of America's most influential industry, a thriving technology ecosystem that some fear will be disrupted by competition from across the Pacific. Chinese billionaires, coders, and internet juggernauts have arrived in Silicon Valley seeking out unicorn startups, top U.S. researchers, and the next big idea. Local startups have learned to pitch to Chinese investors, while in my hometown of Palo Alto, Mark Zuckerberg has devoted himself to studying Chinese. But when the giants of Silicon Valley return the visit in Beijing, they receive a much cooler reception. Google, Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, and many more pillars of the global internet are outright blocked by China's Great Firewall. Still, entranced by the potential of 1 billion new customers, these companies are bending over backward to curry favor with the Chinese Communist Party leadership and its censors. Facebook has worked on software tools that would seal off Chinese users from political content abroad, and Google has offered to build a fully censored search app for China to regain access to its market. A decade ago, techno-utopians gleefully predicted that a free internet would be the midwife to democracy in China. Today, the question isn't how Silicon Valley will change China. It's how China is changing Silicon Valley and the very structure of the global internet. 450 miles farther south, the same dynamics are playing out in the other great bastion of American cultural dominance, Hollywood. For years, Hollywood films dominated Chinese screens and the people's popular imagination. But today, a booming Chinese box office, strict government controls, and the rise of Chinese-made blockbusters are eating away at Hollywood's hegemony. Like their peers in Silicon Valley, Hollywood studios are now rewriting plot lines to please government censors, all in a bid for greater market access. And as China's film industry comes into its own, American films are increasingly forced to compete with Chinese movies that marry Hollywood techniques to local sensibilities, creating China's own equivalents of nationalistic blockbusters like Rambo 2 and Captain America. Finally, complete the panorama from Angel Island by scanning the horizon on all sides, from the brightly painted hilltops of San Francisco to the mansions of Silicon Valley and the Spanish-style homes lining the East Bay. These housing markets have already seen dizzying price hikes from an influx of Silicon Valley tech money, and in the last 5 years, wealthy Chinese home buyers have pushed prices up even higher. Political and economic turbulence in China has led many of the country's wealthiest citizens to seek financial security in international real estate, turning multi-million-dollar U.S. homes into the new Swiss bank account. The phenomenon of wealthy Chinese homebuyers touches not just on real estate prices, but also on social values. California today prides itself on embracing immigrants from all over the world, but that embrace has become more complicated when the new arrivals are wealthier than the longtime residents. It's challenging many Californians to ask themselves, do we welcome all immigrants, or just those of the poor, tired, huddled masses variety? As this new generation of Chinese immigrants sets down roots, they're now shaking up long-standing political coalitions. Earlier generations of working-class Chinese immigrants had become staunch Democrats, often building pan-ethnic coalitions and struggling alongside Black and Latino activists in campaigns for civil rights and racial justice. But the new immigrants are leaving China and entering America under far different circumstances. Instead of earning minimum wage at jobs in Chinatown, they often have high-paying tech and investing jobs in wealthy suburbs. For this cohort, affirmative action has become a lightning rod issue, catalyzing a new generation of Chinese American activists that coalesced around an unlikely champion, Donald Trump. Now they are fanning out across city councils and serving as foot soldiers in a new wave of conservative Chinese American politics. The phenomena glimpsed in this panorama are playing out to different degrees in cities and towns all across America. They are bringing the U.S.-China relationship down from the realm of geopolitics and directly into the lives of ordinary Americans. In doing so, they're shifting key dimensions of the relationship from the White House to the State House and from the Politburo to the PTA meeting. To see where the world's two most powerful countries are meeting, cooperating, and competing today, we need to get out of Washington, D.C. and Beijing. Welcome to the Transpacific Experiment. What is the Transpacific Experiment? The Transpacific Experiment is the living laboratory for a new breed of grassroots superpower diplomacy. It is the fluid ecosystem of students, entrepreneurs, investors, immigrants, and ideas bouncing back and forth between the Golden State and the Middle Kingdom. It's the Chinese undergrads expanding their horizons on California campuses, and the Silicon Valley startups scratching for a toehold in China. The California mayors courting Chinese factory investment, and the Chinese governors studying California carbon markets. As the top destination for Chinese investors, students, tourists, technologists, filmmakers, and homebuyers, California is ground zero for this experiment in deep and multifaceted engagement between China and the United States. The results of this experiment, the personal ties, economic frictions, and technological innovations, are already reshaping China and the United States and filtering out into the international system that orbits around them. All of these interactions bring new opportunities for investment, jobs, tuition dollars, and fascinating cultural fusion, but also new anxieties. When international diplomacy enters our everyday lives, it is transformed. Greater contact can humanize the other side, turning a faceless other into a neighbor, classmate, or even friend. But that close-up contact can also drag things in the other direction, sharpening awareness of our differences and making geopolitical problems feel personal. In the Transpacific Experiment, we see both of these forces at work. A magnetic pull toward greater integration and synergy, as well as an intense backlash when one side feels manipulated or taken advantage of. Here we catch a glimpse of the tension that animates this experiment in grassroots diplomacy. This new breed of deep U.S.-China engagement has the potential to bring tremendous benefit to people in both countries, but in that process, it creates entirely new problems that hit closer to home. Heightening the drama is the grand geopolitical backdrop to these interactions. In the century and a half since Chinese and American people first came face-to-face in California, the relative positions of the two countries have changed dramatically. During that first wave of engagement in the 1800s, China was a once great dynastic empire slowly being torn apart by colonial aggression and internal strife. The United States was instead an up-and-coming nation of immigrants, an unproven democratic experiment mixing lofty ideals, messy realities, and mounting military strength. Today, the people of these countries are getting reacquainted on different footing, as citizens of the world's two superpowers. Now, the United States plays the role of the incumbent juggernaut. It is home to powerful global industries and proud national traditions, but also an increasingly fraught economic, social, and political order. And China is now the up-and-comer, a nation that has emerged from decades of domestic turmoil to challenge the United States for global leadership. To complicate matters further, China has not risen to this position by walking the path prescribed for it by Western theorists: free markets, free speech, and democratic politics. Instead, it has relied on its own unique alchemy of Leninist politics, state-guided development, and strict controls on speech and culture. That geopolitical role reversal infuses every aspect of the Transpacific Experiment. New ties may be forged at the grassroots, but they are often colored by our sense of relative standing on the world stage. How Americans feel about their new Chinese neighbors is intimately wrapped up in our feelings about China as a rising power, as well as insecurities about the trajectory of our own national experiment in democracy. Chinese people's perceptions of these interactions are similarly bound up in questions of national pride and insecurity. On a good day, the United States and its top companies might be looked at with admiration as a source of inspiration for artists, entrepreneurs, and educators. On a bad day, that same country is seen as mired in steep and unsalvageable decline, an aging nation that will expend its last ounce of energy attempting to hold China down. As Chinese investors, immigrants, and ideas make their presence felt on U.S. soil, they pose a question that challenges something deep within the American psyche. Are Americans ready for a world in which they engage with Chinese people, companies, and ideas on equal footing, or a world in which the Chinese side has the upper hand? Today, California is the space in which these tensions, frictions, and possible futures are taking shape. In many ways, China and California make for an odd couple. America's most liberal state and one of the world's most sophisticated authoritarian regimes. A bastion of environmental protectionism and an industrial behemoth that leads the world in carbon emissions. The free-spirited home of everything from the hippies to the Kardashians, and an ancient Confucian culture built on ritual and personal restraint. And yet, those apparent contradictions are often what have drawn these two states into their dialectical dance. Chinese leaders see a vision for their own country's future in California. Blue skies, top universities, innovative technology, and global blockbusters. They know that if China is going to make the leap from a middle to a high-income country, it needs to move up the global value chain, fostering technological and cultural industries. In that light, California offers both inspiration and a tremendous wealth of resources to be accessed or acquired. For Chinese families, the stakes are less grandiose but no less important. They want clean air for their lungs, a good education for their kids, and a place to stash their life savings that is safe from the vagaries of the Chinese political system. They often don't think of themselves as volunteer diplomats in the most pivotal international relationship of the 21st century, and yet circumstance and happenstance have made it so. On the U.S. side of the equation, these same phenomena have a tendency to challenge dearly held values and pose uncomfortable questions about our own nation. At the neighborhood level, the new Chinese arrivals are turning many American ideas about immigration on their head, confronting Californians with complicated questions about acceptance, assimilation, and citizenship. Residents of suburbs like my hometown often feel comfortable, even self-righteous, in their open-armed embrace of immigrants and refugees targeted by President Trump. They abhor build the wall chants and proudly decorate their lawns with signs declaring, "No human is illegal." Looking back on the Chinese exclusion era, they condemn the racist white workers who resented Chinese laborers for stealing their jobs. But tweak a few of the variables and bring these issues to their own doorstep, and you might get far different reactions from these same people. What if the immigrant isn't a poor laborer, but a rich family escaping the Beijing smog? What if the resource being competed for isn't a working-class job, but a house in your hometown? What if, like many of the early immigrant laborers, the new arrivals have no intention to remain in the country long-term? Suddenly, that comfortable moral clarity is harder to come by, forcing a closer examination of exactly what principles to hold on to and which to amend. For California's trademark industries, technology, and culture, the rise of competitive Chinese ecosystems also challenges long-standing orthodoxy about the sources of innovation and creativity. For over half a century, California has been a global haven for personal freedoms and alternative lifestyles. During that same period, it has also dominated the world of technology and culture. That correlation between personal freedoms, technological innovation, and cultural production led many to believe these phenomena were inextricably woven together. A country without political freedoms could not truly innovate, and people without freedom of expression couldn't create a thriving cultural industry. It's a mantra woven deep into our American psyche, and one that seemed to be confirmed by the country's successive triumphs over rivals such as the Soviet Union. But the rise of China's technology and movie industries is steadily peeling apart that once solid correlation. In the process, it is challenging certain core beliefs about what makes innovation and creativity possible. Instead of putting stock in abstract personal freedoms, China is instead betting that you can build these industries up brick by brick. Throw together a critical mass of computer programmers, free-flowing capital, film sets, movie screens, and disposable income, and hope that innovation and commercial culture emerge from it. The game is far from over in these industries, but China has consistently outperformed expectations, and that surprising run of success is changing the conversation about technology and culture on both sides of the Pacific. Looked at from a 40,000-foot perspective, these issues can appear abstract or distant from everyday life. But all of these open questions and thorny problems are playing out in real time. They are affecting lives and livelihoods today, driven forward by real people with big ambitions, fears, and hopes for what the Transpacific Experiment will mean to them. Over the past 6 years, I've used my own work as a journalist, analyst, consultant, and general hanger-on in California and China to follow these people's stories and fit together the pieces of this puzzle as best I can. The book you're now hearing is the result of that piecing together. It's an imperfect, incomplete, and subjective snapshot of these phenomena. In the process of writing, the people, places, and questions dissected here became a part of my life. Much of the writing here reflects that closeness, with both the insight and the bias that closeness brings. Bridging two distinct countries and cultures is a delicate and often fraught process. If done right, it can open entirely new vistas for the people and the places involved. If done wrong, it can turn minor frictions into a major backlash, fueling mutual suspicion and outright resentment along national, cultural, and personal lines. This book tells the stories of people who have tried, and sometimes failed, to build those bridges between China and California. But before telling you their stories, I'll briefly share my own. Over the last 5 years, the Transpacific Experiment has exerted a similar pull on me. Part personal, part professional, and a whole lot of dumb luck. That run of luck began with a broken ankle and a visa problem. Ankles and opportunities. I grew up in the Bay Area, but before 2008 had virtually no interest in China. My high school didn't offer Mandarin courses, and even if it had, I would have stuck with Spanish. In our survey courses on world history, we blew through a dozen Chinese dynasties in a couple of weeks. By the time I got to college, I could sum up my knowledge of modern China in 3 phrases: Mao Zedong, Tiananmen Square, and Factory of the World. But in the summer after my sophomore year in college, I stumbled into a job as a counselor at an academic summer camp in Beijing. It was June 2008, and the city was ramping up to host the Summer Olympics, furiously repaving roads and launching campaigns to discourage spitting in public. Despite those efforts, Beijing was still a
Sample complete. Ready to continue?